October 10, 1979, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics North Ossetian village of El Kotovo. The operatives who arrived at the local Sofia restaurant in response to the call were met with a horrifying scene. In the banquet hall, among overturned tables, broken chairs and shattered dishes, the bodies of 8 men and women lay scattered. There were bloody traces and shell casings from firearms everywhere. The hall resembled an execution site. Who was the executioner who dealt with people so cruelly and cold-bloodedly, and for what purpose? We'll discuss this in more detail today. Among the younger generation, and even the older generation in general, among a certain category of people, there is a belief that there were no criminal gangs or high-profile bloody crimes during the Soviet Union, only theft, petty hooliganism, and domestic conflicts. But that's not true. There were bandits back then as well, ready to commit the most serious and inhumane crimes. North Ossetia is one of the autonomous republics of the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, located in picturesque mountains, bordered by rivers with enchanting waterfalls and rapids. Pushkin himself visited these places in 1829 and left his autograph on the Tartup minaret located in the foothills of Kazbek near the village of Ilkotovo. The republic was and remains a paradise for tourists. It has a mild climate, many natural and historical attractions, as well as resorts and sanatoriums famous throughout the country. Every year, thousands of people from all over the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics came there for vacation. The local residents made a good living from the visitors, selling homemade wines, vegetables, fruits, and souvenirs. There were many wealthy Ossetians, and criminals of all kinds knew this very well. They formed gangs, attacked and robbed people. Some were caught and imprisoned, while others, the more fortunate ones, managed to avoid punishment for a long time. The founders of one of these successful gangs were Aslan Gigirov and Ruslan Gubotchikov. Both were born and raised in remote mountain villages, but they had no desire to engage in honest work. When they visited cities, they saw that there was another life. Cars, expensive restaurants, bundles of banknotes. In the Caucasus, courage and bravery were valued, not modesty. Young shepherds had no idea how to get rich honestly, so they chose the simplest and most accessible path, crime. It began with petty theft and cattle rustling. Soon it became clear that getting rich quickly this way wouldn't work. The friends decided to go big. Through criminal connections, they acquired 2 Tokarev pistols and a Osmanov hunting shotgun. Now they could engage in more profitable robberies. In 1975, together with 2 new members who joined the gang, Shaganov and Bitsuev, they carried out an attack on the Liskinskoy Consumer Society. After killing the guard, they stole 3,000 rubles from the register. Their first significant loot and the unsolved crime inspired them to commit further atrocities. The subsequent attacks followed soon after. In the capital of Kabardino-Balkaria, the city of Nalchik, in that same year of 1975, there was a raid on the Vesna cafe. The bandits, armed and in daylight, stole about 2,000 rubles from the register and fled before police arrived. Next, a department store was robbed in North Ossetian Digar. Threatening with weapons, the bandits took more than 2,000 rubles from the cash register, and once again the robbers could not be caught. After the daring raids, the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the North Ossetian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic decided to increase security and patrol areas with the largest crowds of people. Notices with descriptions of the bandits were sent out, and large stores were placed under surveillance. Sensing danger, Getirov's gang decided to change their activities for a while. They switched from government institutions to private houses. One of these targets was the estate of Merzuev, a wealthy and well-known collective farm chairman in the village of Kizburun, Kabardino-Balkaria. Armed with pistols and a sawed-off shotgun, the robbers tried to break in closer to midnight, but the alerted owner met them with gunfire. In the Caucasus, almost every household has firearms, rifles, and hunting carbines. And that's only what's registered, it's an ancient tradition. In the shootout, Merzuev's wife was seriously wounded and later became disabled. The bandits, scared by the homeowner's brothers arriving to help, chose not to risk it and quickly fled the crime scene. Not carrying out what he had planned, Merzuev swore to find them and take blood revenge. His brothers and relatives did everything they could to identify the attackers. The Mirzoev family was well known in the area for having the right connections and influence in the Republic's authorities. Given the Caucasian traditions and hot temper, there was no doubt that the bandits would be in trouble, and if caught, they would hardly live to see trial. Seriously frightened by the revenge of the Gegirovs and Gubochikovs, they began to think about how to avoid it, because now not only the police were hunting them, and then Gegirov had a great idea. They needed to commit a petty theft and deliberately get caught. By landing in prison for a short term, they would avoid revenge and lay low while serving their sentence. In the meantime, people would forget about them. And soon they are caught stealing a pair of collective farm horses. After confessing and repenting, they get a brief sentence and are sent to the same penal colony. The accomplices diligently follow the rules, hiding their aggressive nature and not attracting unnecessary attention from the administration. There they meet another inmate, Kabala Osmanov. Deep down he turned out to be just as much of a scoundrel as they were, and he completely shared their views on life. In the summer of 1978, having fully served their sentence, they are released. 6 months later, Osmanov is released too. Now nothing can stop them from committing robberies and assaults. On Osmanov's recommendation, 2 more people joined the gang, Kiarov and Sheganov. Both have already served time for robbery. After being behind bars, they became fierce haters of socialist society. Osmanov proved himself not only as a hardened criminal. Being naturally cunning, cautious and intelligent, he quickly gained authority among Gegirov's bandits. His persuasive skills and natural psychological talent would soon attract even more people to the gang. People just like him, ruthless thugs ready to commit cruel and inhuman crimes for money. The gang was growing, and to supply its members with weapons, Gegirov and Osmanov, who had become the leader's right-hand men, decided to carry out a daring attack on the armory of the Nalchik correctional colony. Gegirov claimed that his childhood friend Gazhev, the senior supervisor at the detention center, was ready, of course not for free, to make a duplicate key to the armory. With it, they could open the doors and steal Kalashnikov rifles. The gang needed automatic weapons to attack serious administrative targets, banks, state farm cash offices, and motor transport enterprises. The entire operation was strictly secret. To avoid any information leaks, only 3 people knew about it: Osmanov, Gegirov, and Gubochikov. For the raid to get weapons, Gegirov took only Gubochikov with him. After all, in case of failure, at least one authority figure had to remain in the gang. At night, the bandits sneaked up to the arsenal and, after stunning and tying up the guard, tried to get inside the weapons storage. But either the duplicate turned out to be fake, or the alarm that the thieves hadn't disabled went off. They didn't have time to open the doors. Taking the guard's assault rifle, they quickly left the scene of the crime. After such a daring attack, a special task force was created in the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Republic. The bandits are being searched for day and night, but the investigators are unable to pick up the attackers' trail. A decision is made to enhance security at all key government facilities. The gang members were dissatisfied with the failure, but didn't care much about its reasons. The main thing is Gegirov did not fulfill what he promised. At the meeting, it was decided that Gegirov would give up his place as the gang leader to Osmanov. Only friendly accusations, relationships, and unanimous approval of the decision to transfer power prevented a bloody clash between the 2 leaders. The new leader takes the job seriously. The organized crime group is joined by new members through old acquaintances, weapons and ammunition are purchased, and a network of informants and spotters is created. Soon, under Osmanov's leadership, the gang had 36 thugs. Deciding that they had enough strength, he planned to attack the state bank branch in Nalchik, but on the night before the attack, he changed his mind. Through his contact, he learned that recently the state bank's security had been reinforced with armed VOHR employees, and 3 police patrols were constantly patrolling the area. Caution and foresight saved his men from certain death in a shootout that time. Osmanov decides to change tactics. He splits all the gang members into small groups of 3 or 4 people. He arms them, assigns them to districts, and directs them on raids, specifying the best targets and places to rob. Most of the victims of the robberies don't even try to report it to the police. The fear of retaliation against their loved ones forces even the bravest to remain silent. Impressive sums flow into the gang's common fund. The cunning leader only forbade taking from the victims jewelry. Through them, the police could easily track them down. He himself, together with Gagirov, Gubachikov, and the especially dangerous repeat offender Kiarov, took on the task of replenishing the gang's fleet of cars. Armed with a submachine gun and pistols, they were preparing to unleash real hell in the Caucasus. Kabardino-Balkaria and North Ossetia were swept by a wave of bloody and often senselessly brutal crimes. On the side of the Caucasus highway on the way to Pyatigorsk, 2 bodies were found, shot with pistols. The husband and wife, the Gasumovs, who were returning home to Azerbaijan from the fruit market, their car was never found. Their market earnings were also missing. Soon, on the same highway, a little further from the road, a burned-out car was discovered, in which investigators found 2 bodies, 1 male and 1 female. Inspection revealed they had been shot. The car was set on fire. It is noteworthy that the woman was wearing gold jewelry and the man had an expensive imported watch. The criminals didn't take any of that. According to the investigators, when the man noticed the bandits, he most likely started the car and tried to get away from his pursuers. They opened fire to kill. Bullet holes in the doors and seats confirmed their suspicion. The dead passengers were burned along with the riddled car. The crimes continued. A married couple, the Sakians, contacted the police. They said that they stopped on the way from Pyatigorsk to Nalchik to have a snack. A car drove up to them and people jumped out, pointed weapons at the couple and ordered them to get out of the car. They were about to be shot, but the woman pleaded, saying they had 5 children at home and only their parents. The criminals took the money and drove off. The last of them got into the Sakian couple's car, warned them to keep quiet, and followed his accomplices. The stolen Zhiguli was red. It became clear that an organized and well-armed gang of robbers with weapons was operating in the area. Their crimes were marked by extreme cynicism and ruthlessness. Their goal was the victims' money and cars. A distinctive signature of not taking jewelry became the gangsters' sinister calling card. Sometimes the robbers' loot was insignificant, and then they would take out their frustration on their victims with brutal cruelty. For example, during the robbery of another car, an elderly couple and their son were brutally shot. They had little money with them, and the car was too old to be of any interest. The police in both ASSRs were exhausted, but it was futile. The victims were either dead or so terrified that they couldn't clearly describe the attackers' features. The KGB of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics joins the investigation. A series of search operations are carried out, the testimonies of random witnesses are studied, and all suspects are checked for involvement in the crimes. Even the experienced state security officers will not be able to track down the bloody gang. On the evening of October 10, 1979, a man staggered into the emergency room of the hospital in the village of Ilkotovo shouting, "Help! We've been shot!" and collapsed onto the stone floor. Running up to him, the nurse noticed several bloody stains on his clothes. These were bullet wounds. At the Sofia restaurant. Shooting. Call the police, the stranger continued in a weakening whisper. A rapid response team and multiple ambulances quickly go to the restaurant. Sofia was one of the most famous and prestigious restaurants in the North Ossetian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic. Located in a picturesque spot at the foot of the Kazbek Peaks, it was a favorite place for relaxation among the local party elite and respected people of the region. Holidays, weddings, anniversaries, all memorable events gathered many guests, and the guests were by no means poor. Sometimes people would have a few too many drinks and conflicts or even fights would break out. But what could have happened this time? The detectives who arrived understood right away. Things had gotten very heated here, and not because of the wine. At the door on the steps of the restaurant there was a body with multiple gunshot wounds. Not far away a dog was lying, apparently the first to be hit by the bullets. The guard, who ran out when he heard the barking, was shot with automatic weapons. After being hit by bullets, he died on the spot. Senior lieutenant pulled his pistol from the holster and the others who arrived followed his example. The attackers could have set up an ambush. Be careful with your weapons. They entered the restaurant prepared. This is Taimuraz Batagov, chief of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the North Ossetian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic reporting. The restaurant hall looked like it had just seen a battle. Overturned tables, broken chairs, and shattered dishes were scattered everywhere. Fresh blood stained the floor, walls, and tablecloths. Spent rifle and pistol cartridges were scattered everywhere. The criminals didn't spare any ammunition. Men and women are lying in various positions. Some tried to escape but were caught by a burst of automatic fire, while others are lying by the chairs, where they fell dead after receiving fatal wounds. I noticed a woman in the corner. It was Sima Zilikova, the well-known director of District Public Catering in Nalchik. Her lifeless body was riddled with bullets and they shot crosswise, finishing her off with a shot to the head. Everyone was put down while still showing signs of life with a control shot. It felt like we were at the site of an execution, where everyone received their sentence carried out immediately, coldly and precisely. While inspecting the restaurant's yard, the officers found a woman in a car. She had received 3 gunshot wounds, but her strong body was still fighting for life. The ambulance rushed her to the hospital, and although she was critical, she survived. Her name was Rinatoyeva, the girl who cheated death itself that night. When she was able to speak, she shared the chilling details of that evening at the restaurant. My husband and I arrived at the restaurant last. We had a flat tire and had to change it. No more than 10 minutes had passed since the first toast when suddenly we heard screams and gunshots outside. The men jumped from the tables as someone turned off the lights. 3 male silhouettes stood in the restaurant doorway. Bursting inside, they started shooting chaotically. One of them, obviously having been here before, found the light switch. Afterward, they fired deliberately. I jumped up from my seat and ran toward the kitchen, but I didn't make it. Something hit me hard in the shoulder, then in the side. I fell and stayed down, pretending to be dead. Gunshots and screams filled the area. Sima fell next to me, and I heard her begging them to take the money and jewelry but spare her life. One of the attackers shouted, "So, you're still alive?" Then there was the crackle of automatic gunfire and Sima fell silent. I don't remember how long this whole nightmare lasted. I heard the unhurried footsteps of the bandits. They were checking if anyone was still alive. They kicked me with their foot, but I didn't move, and that's it. I heard the voice of one of them. A quiet moan came from the end of the hall, followed by a gunshot. The criminals were finishing the survivors. I felt my strength leaving me. The raiders, making sure there were no survivors left, calmly left. I slowly crawled toward the exit. I was still hoping that my husband Kazbek had miraculously survived. On the terrace I saw him. He was still breathing when I crawled up to him and crying wrapped my arms around his body. He passed away without regaining consciousness right in my arms. Gathering the last of my strength, I crawled to the nearest car. Climbing onto the seat, I pressed my head against the horn, hoping that someone would hear the sound. After that, I lost consciousness. The second survivor of this massacre is Arslan Gergiev. As he was running out of the restaurant, he was hit by gunfire from a pistol and fell on the veranda 10 meters from the entrance. After falling and losing consciousness, he was still alive. As they were leaving, the bandits forgot about him, and that saved his life. When he regained consciousness, he got into his car and drove to the nearest village, Ilkotovo. He received help at the hospital. This is what he told the investigators who arrived. When I heard gunshots, I ran to the exit. 3 men came up the stairs, 2 with pistols, 1 with an automatic rifle. Realizing that I was alone and unarmed and couldn't do anything, I ran across the terrace toward the parking lot. A moment later they shoot me, I fall and black out. When I came to and realized the bandits had left, I staggered to my car and drove to Sila for help. The investigative team, led by the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs of Kabardino-Balkaria, Mikhail Alakayev, immediately got to work at the crime scene. Mikhail Alakayev tells the story. The criminals shot people methodically and mercilessly so that there would be no witnesses left and no one could identify them. They took the restaurant's cash register, but there was only 700 rubles in it, which is not a large amount. They took nothing from the victims, not even their money or valuables. We've already encountered a similar pattern before. The theory of a robbery was the most plausible one, but why didn't the bandits take the personal belongings of the restaurant guests? They seemed in a hurry, maybe, but then, how do you explain how calmly they finished off the survivors? The survivor Zarina Toiva mentioned the fact that important guests were supposed to come for Ksime Zelichova's birthday. the district party leader, prosecutor, and judge in Nalchik, but for various reasons, none of them showed up at the restaurant. Based on this, the investigators suggested the theory of the physical elimination of the local leaders of Soviet power. It is known that all bandits hate those who pursue and imprison them and are ready to take ruthless revenge for it. Perhaps, having learned from their sources about the presence of party officials, they wanted to stage a public execution. Revenge explained the thoroughness with which they carried out the shooting. At that time, many people in the Caucasus were dissatisfied with the authorities. Since the time of Stalin, people still remembered the deportation of entire nations, the ban on practicing Islam, the closure of mosques, and the forced imposition of socialist ideology. And while ordinary people hid this carefully, fearing to fall out of favor and harm their families, the bandits, on the other hand, openly displayed their hatred for the communists. Another version was also put forward about the personal revenge of the hostess of the celebration. New details surfaced about the buffet workers firing after an inspection at Zelikova's restaurant. Upon being dismissed, she vowed revenge against the food service director. They also recalled the drunken Gazayev who started a fight with the restaurant staff. Police were called and the offender was restrained and taken to the district station. And he was not a simple man with a criminal past and could very well have taken revenge with his buddies in such a barbaric way. There was even a theory connected to Seema's personal life. Her ex-husband, whom she had separated from quite recently, did not forgive the insult and publicly promised to punish her for offending his honor. The investigators explored all theories. It doesn't matter what the reason for the crime was. What matters is that the criminals must be found at any cost. Ballistics experts were unable to determine the origin of the first Tokarev pistol used by the attackers, but the second one was recently involved in a crime where 2 people were robbed and killed. The automatic cartridge cases quickly linked to the automatic Kalashnikov stolen from Chasovoy at the Nalchik colony. Similar cases appeared at numerous crime scenes, a secretive violent crime group. A large number of witnesses who could provide any clues about the appearance of the attackers were interviewed again. The descriptions they gave matched the portraits made by the survivors. Moreover, Gurgiev, who ran out of the restaurant, managed to notice that there was a red Zhiguli parked at the entrance, and it did not belong to any of the guests. That means the criminals arrived in it. All the materials on the gang's attacks collected over several years were gathered together. By decision of the leadership of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics Ministry of Internal Affairs, 2 operational headquarters were formed in the North Ossetian and Kabardino-Balkarian SSRs. General Volk, head of the Moscow Criminal Investigation Department, led the operation after arriving from Moscow. Authorities began searching, arresting, and interrogating anyone even slightly suspected of involvement in the attack on Sofia. Residents of the republics recalled that time as a reminder of the 1937 repressions. Authorities rushed to catch the criminals and solve the case before November 7th, the day of the Great October Socialist Revolution. Investigators put pressure on the suspects and did not even shy away from making threats. Sometimes they really managed to solve old crimes that had already been considered cold cases. Several dangerous repeat offenders who had been put on the all-Union wanted list were detained. The detectives seized a lot of unregistered weapons that had been kept since the Great Patriotic War. More often, innocent people were detained and had to spend a long time in pre-trial detention until their innocence was proven. Thanks to such active work by the police in the 2 republics, crime dropped almost 5-fold. However, Moscow secretly ordered the operation headquarters to catch the gang before the November 7th celebrations. Dead or alive, despite their efforts, the police and KGB officers couldn't find the trail. Obviously, the bandits, sensing danger, went to ground. From predators, they turned into the hunted. And who knows, maybe this time they would have managed to escape justice again if not for His Majesty. Chance. At the end of October, early in the morning, a tearful woman knocked on the office door of the district police chief. Introducing herself as Tamara Usmanova, she said in a trembling voice that her husband Kabala Osmanov had tried to take her life. He and his brother had been drinking for several days in their house in the village of Ashigar. This morning, when all the alcohol ran out, her husband decided to send her to the store for more. The woman, who had been listening to insults and humiliation from the drunken brothers for several days, flatly refused to go. Then Kabala went to the storage room and came back with a pistol, pressing it to the woman's head. He yelled, "Ah, you bitch! You dare defy your husband! Leave now, or I'll shoot you like a dog!" Then he struck her hard on the back. The frightened woman pretended to agree, but after leaving the house, she ran not to the store but to the police. She suspected her husband, who had been convicted multiple times, was involved in criminal activities, and she had no doubt that in a drunken rage he could easily harm her. An hour later, 2 police officers from the operations team arrived at the Osmanov house. They left their motorcycle with a sidecar in the yard and walked to the house. They had about 10 meters left to go when suddenly a short, broad-shouldered man appeared in the doorway. He was holding a Kalashnikov rifle in his hands. The experienced officers split to either side, drawing their pistols as they moved. One hid behind the shed, another dropped to the ground among the bushes. Samarodin was drunk. Osmanov couldn't react quickly and opened fire right away. That saved them. Firing short bursts, shooting first at one, then at the other, he ran to the motorcycle. Jumping onto the seat, he slung the rifle over his back and started the engine. The officers then began shooting, targeting his legs. They hoped the bandit wouldn't escape and that they'd capture him alive but wounded. Osmanov had been in shootouts more than once. Besides, he was physically strong and 2 bullets that hit his leg didn't stop him. The motorcycle kicked up dust and vanished down the dirt road toward the Kavkaz highway. After firing a few more shots at the fleeing bandit, the officers rushed into the house where, according to Tamara, another bandit was still inside, but he managed to escape. Such a fortunate opportunity was missed. General Volkov was furious. The district police chief stood before him, red-faced like a scolded schoolboy. His men had lost a member of the gang they were after, despite sleeping only 3 hours a day for a second month. The submachine gun in the criminals' hands left no doubt it was them. In the house, they would find a stash of weapons, Tokarev pistols, sawed-off shotguns, and even a Sudayev submachine gun. The arsenal indicated that the gang was large, and all of them needed to be found. Determine the route based on the amount of gasoline. Send operational teams to all settlements within the possible area, block the roads, and report the situation every half hour. The voice hammered in my temples, each word echoing in my mind. And this time, make sure he is caught alive. The next day, one of the residents of the village of Kashkatau, which is 10 kilometers from Aushaiga, stopped a passing police patrol. He said yesterday a motorcycle approached his house, which is at the end of the village. The man aimed an automatic rifle at him and demanded entry into the house. The frightened owner complied. Kabal, as he called himself, ordered him to bandage his wounded legs and promised a lot of money for his silence. Realizing who was in front of him, the man seemed to agree. He set the table with snacks and wine, and when Kabal got drunk and fell asleep, he ran to look for help. Osmanov was captured quietly in his sleep without a shot. At the hospital, they arranged 24-hour security. None of the staff knew his identity, origin, or what had happened to him. At first he denied everything, but when confronted with irrefutable evidence, he started talking. He gave up all his accomplices from that restaurant incident and explained why the crime was committed. According to him, all they needed was money. Why did they shoot so many innocents? They weren't used to leaving witnesses. Nothing personal. Within a few days, Gegirov, Gubochikov and Kyarov were found and arrested. They, in turn, gave up other members of the gang. A total of 20 people ended up behind bars, but as would later become clear, not all of them were found. The investigation into this high-profile case lasted a full 2 years. In total, investigators counted more than 50 criminal episodes involving the Osmanov gang. However, the defendants were in no hurry to admit their guilt, and each crime had to be carefully proven by bringing in witnesses and eyewitnesses. The case was further complicated by the fact that the direct victims and their relatives received threats and warnings. The gangsters who remained at large promised to take revenge for their accomplices. The classified case of the Osmanov organized crime group was hardly covered by the media. All materials were kept under strict secrecy. It was decided to hold the trial of Osmanov, Gegirov, Gubochikov and Kayarov behind closed doors in Vladimir. No local judge dared sentence the leaders. Everyone feared revenge from those who remained at large. A KGB special unit in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics handled transporting and guarding convicts. In spring 1981, the defendants were taken by armored, windowless carriage on a special train to the Vladimir Pretrial Detention Center. At the start of the hearing, the courthouse was cordoned off by 2 rings of internal troops and KGB officers numbering at least 300. 2 armored personnel carriers paused at the entrance while over 100 police officers waited inside. Residents and visitors were screened at train stations and the airport. Any suspicion led to immediate detention. All 4 ringleaders were sentenced to execution. The sentence was carried out. Other group members got sentences of 10 to 15 years in prison. Kabardino-Balkaria and the North Ossetian Soviet Socialist Republic were finally able to breathe easy. The inhuman and bloody crimes stopped. For years, law enforcement kept pursuing the remaining Osmanov gang members. The Sofia restaurant, once the pearl of the Caucasus, turned into a terrible place of execution for innocent people. There were almost no visitors. By decision of the local authorities, it was closed. But for a long time, on the steppe where blood once flowed, gunshots could still be heard, and people brought fresh flowers. Soon, a decision was made to demolish the restaurant. Even the Tartupsky minaret, which remembered the times of the Golden Horde, as if unable to withstand the tragic events of 1979, collapsed almost to its foundation. And although the case of the shooting at the Sofia restaurant was carefully hushed up, the writer and publicist Damir Daurov spent a long time gathering every known detail of the terrible incident piece by piece. 30 years later, he would write a documentary story about the shooting of Sentartap, which would be published in Russian and Ossetian. In the book's preface, he wrote, "No statute of limitations applies to these crimes. We are obliged to know and remember our history, and not to repeat the pages of it that are unbearably painful and sad. And what do you think about what happened? Leave your comments, like or dislike. I'll leave all additional materials and sources in the Strashnoti Telegram channel. Subscribe, there's a ton of extra content there."